Do you think it's safe to say the world power structure, the world economic order is shifting like never before? He who controls the oil controls the world. He who controls the gold controls the world. But energy has become vitally important to the world. Oil, energy is the workhorse of the world economy. And he who controls the energy, well, that whole platform, that whole scenario is shifting right below our very feet. We need to talk about it because the shift in the power structure of the world's energy supply will impact the price of gold and silver, and we're going to talk about it right now. So aren't we seeing a total split in the world right now? I don't know about you, but I've never seen anything like this in my lifetime, and I'm almost 53 years old. It just feels like the East, Russia, China, India, the BRICS countries, even the Middle East, like they're starting to form a little team with each other, and those countries control a vast amount of natural resources, energy resources. And they have this little organization they put together called OPEC. And they recently announced a 2 million barrel per day cut, which sent shockwaves throughout the world economy. Because it appears the OPEC countries are standing up for themselves and looking out for their own best interests. This cut was directly a slap in the face to the United States and Joe Biden, who'd actually went to Saudi Arabia, if you saw that, and tried to elbow bump or fist pump the prince, whatever. It was not a good trip. The prince turned around and cut oil supplies, which went directly against what Joe Biden had gone there to fight against. This will cause energy prices to continue to go up, inflation to continue to go up. And what's the United States to do, right? What can the Federal Reserve do to fight this? We know they're in a supposed fight on inflation. Well, the only thing the Federal Reserve can do is raise interest rates higher, slow the world economy, potentially throwing the world economy into a deep recession or possibly even depression, because the United States and the Federal Reserve, they can't control directly the price of oil. All they can do is try to affect the demand by tightening. But if they tighten too far, well, then they'll just completely destroy the U.S. and the world economy. We're going to talk about the United States and oil. It's a fascinating history. But first, what's even more fascinating to me is that you, yes, you, just you, are joining me right now from somewhere in the world. And I appreciate you being here. I know you're the type of person who likes to dive a little deeper. You're a little smarter than the average bear. You want to try to see the forest through the trees. I'm glad you're here. If you get some value from my content, please subscribe. Turn on the little bell notification. That way you'll get notified every time I put out a new video. Leave some comments in the comment section below. You don't have to like me. You don't have to agree with me. We're open to hearing everything, the good, the bad, the ugly. Now let's talk about the history of the United States of America and oil. Did you know in 1971, President Richard Nixon took the United States off the gold standard and basically facilitated a move from the dollar being backed by gold to, you can kind of say, pseudo-backed by oil. It's called the petrodollar. We agreed to be allies with Saudi Arabia, and in return, they would only allow oil to be traded in dollars, blah, blah, blah. So for the last 50 years or so, the dollar has dominated the world trade in oil. That's why the U.S. government went from being a big fan of gold and silver to a kind of an enemy of gold and silver, because they divorced themselves from gold and silver and went with their new girlfriend, oil. So of course they're going to talk bad about gold and silver. If it does well, it's not going to look good for the dollar because the dollar's not based on that anymore. But that's a subject for another video. The U.S. became the dollar dominant in world trade of oil. And do you think that maybe we can say a couple things for sure? Number one, the days of cheap energy are over. And number two, inflation is probably here to stay. This all worked out pretty well for the United States of America, but have you noticed that recently the world seems to be getting a little fed up with the USA? These Eastern countries, China, Russia, the BRICS countries, the Middle East, they're kind of banding together and now starting to stand up for themselves, saying, hey, we're done with these dollar games that are being played. Some people say that the United States government used the dollar as a weapon. So now they're standing up for themselves. And it's almost becoming, this is very interesting, a game of chicken between the Federal Reserve and the OPEC countries, right? The Federal Reserve says, well, we'll just slow the economy down, slow the economy down. That'll bring oil prices down. Well, the OPEC guys say, well, if you're going to slow the economy down, we're going to drop production. So we'll decrease the supply. Sure, the Fed can decrease demand, but we'll decrease supply even more. How long this game of chicken goes on, it could have catastrophic consequences for the world economy. And how are the average everyday people, you and me, how are we faring through this all? Well, if you live in China or India or the Middle East, you're probably doing okay because there's either plenty of oil there or you're getting it from Russia. If you live in China or India, they're going to be okay. They're part of this new OPEC type alliance. If you live in Europe, you are likely suffering. My heart goes out to you because Europe doesn't really produce a lot of their own energy. They can rely on some supplies from the Nordic countries, but nonetheless, energy prices in Europe are skyrocketing. Let's talk about the United States of America. Do you live in the United States of America like I do? Yeah, we're doing okay, right? Gas is more expensive than it was 2 years ago, but it's not like crazy through the roof. The real crazy part about what's going on in the United States of America is that this country, do you remember just a few years ago, we were one of the biggest energy producers in the world. We produced more energy than we consumed. There is more oil within the borders of the United States of America than we could use in the next 150 years or some crazy statistic like that. But because of government regulations, we aren't allowed to harvest that energy and use it. It makes no sense, right? Like we'll beg the Saudis to pump more oil when we're sitting on top of a huge supply ourselves. I mean, come on, man, wake up. So what do we see when we put this all together? It sure seems like high oil prices are here to stay. It sure feels like the Federal Reserve is going to keep raising interest rates and killing the world economy. Doesn't it smell like stagflation, right? A stagnant economy with inflationary pressures remaining. Look, when the world wakes up to the fact that stagflation's here and one of the only good places to hide from that is in the precious metals, gold and silver will do very well. In the interim, it's going to be a bumpy road, no doubt about it. But in the end, I feel like, and remember, I don't have a crystal ball, but you probably don't either, but I feel like the price of the precious metals and whatever currency comes to be or whoever's in power, the metals are going to maintain and do very, very well. Because guess what? I got a little secret for you, a little bonus. Those countries that control the oil right now, those Eastern countries that we've allowed ourselves to become enslaved to in some ways, they love their precious metals. They're even talking about starting a reserve currency that will be based on real assets. That would include gold and silver. Hey, thanks for joining me. I'm going to look forward to you coming back next time.